welcome. Today I'm with Qian and Moresh Kokane, and we're here to discuss their blockchain startup Konkrete, which is looking at addressing some of the housing affordability issues here in Australia. So welcome and thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you for having us.
So I just thought I'd start with a little bit about yourselves and your entrepreneurial background. So Moresh, would you like to tell me a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I started on my first technology startup right out of my last year in engineering school, and we built online technology and security solutions for major banks in the US. That worked quite well and we made a little bit of money. I took that money and invested in a solar renewable energy venture, and the only way somebody can make a small fortune in solar is to start with a large fortune.
Yeah.
So after that experience, I went back to what was my core experience in finance and technology, and I worked in the US for about 8 or 9 years. But I really wanted to work something of my own, which my visa prevented me. So I applied for and got a PR in Australia, came here in mid 2014 and started working on property crowdfunding. I'd seen the success of property crowdfunding in the US, and given the fact that Australians love property so much, it was only a natural fit to implement this. And since then I've been working on Estate Baron for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So that's my background.
Fantastic. Maybe tell us a little bit about Estate Baron and what you guys do there.
Sure. So at Estate Baron, what we do is we assist property developers to raise equity funding for their development projects. So as of now, there is a clear demand in the market from property developers for equity funding for their development projects, because banks are tightening the LVR requirements and money is harder to get for development projects. So what we do is we essentially enable the property developers to do an IPO for their development projects, and which allows them to raise equity funding for their projects from mom and dad investors all across Australia.
Yeah.
So Estate Baron is the leading property crowdfunding platform for development projects in Australia, where anybody can invest in a development project with small amounts in a fully compliant manner.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's obviously very well established in that sort of space then, and crowdfunding. That deposit and that startup obviously helping a lot of good projects find their wings and get into this space.
So we have been around for 3.5 years. We have helped more than 15 property developers all across Australia, in Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne and Sydney, and have raised more than 12 million via our own networks and more than 40 million through the property developers network for various projects, and we have several projects which are completed. So it's been a long journey, but it's a fairly well understood and established model as of now, at least from the property development perspective.
Fantastic. And it sounds like you're starting to see some of those fruits bearing and the project finding its wings. So what about yourself, Qian? Where did your journey begin?
Yeah, well, I actually didn't start in technology. My first business was actually in events and touring. So we did underage dance parties, because back then in Melbourne there wasn't too many going around, and me wanting to be in the music biz, thought that was a good entry point. We then expanded into conferences. So we did different types, but our biggest one was Think Inc., which is a science and rationalism conference. So we brought down famous scientists and to come and talk about
I've heard of Think Inc.
things like that. And then I found my way into doing bits and pieces of marketing, and then I found my way into co-working, which ended up being one of the first tech co-working spaces in Melbourne. That was Collins Collective back in 2012. And throughout that process, I discovered, tech startups. It's where it's at. I wanted to do more with those kinds of startups. I didn't want to just be a landlord to them through co-working, and that's how Steve and I, my co-founder for Collective Campus, we decided to create Collective Campus, which is we do startup acceleration programs, we do innovation projects with corporates as well, and that's how we ultimately ended up finding a way to work with Moresh through Estate Baron too.
Yeah. My next question was, how did you two end up coming together?
So Melbourne, where we are both based, has a fairly small startup community, and everybody knows everybody else. So we have been introduced to each other for a little bit, but we started working closely together only when the Charter Hall sponsored PropTech Accelerator program, which was run by Collective Campus, came about. So I applied to it late last year, got selected, then got finals, sort of shortlisted for the final 4. And during the 3-month process, the team at Collective Campus and us got to know each other, and I sort of laid down the vision which I had for Estate Baron, which was falling short because I did not have the marketing and the operational resources. And that's where I was fortunate enough that Collective Campus showed the interest in taking this to fruition, and that's how this partnership has come about, where Estate Baron is bringing the technology and the compliance side of things to the equation, whereas Qian and Collective Campus are helping us with the marketing and operations to help this come to life.
Brilliant.
That's
So it was sort of a perfect harmony of two existing companies in
Correct.
that way. Cool. And you're obviously looking to leverage blockchain in this project, and so I guess where did your interest first start with blockchain as a technology?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, I have a little bit of an objectivist/libertarian outlook. So I think everybody in the blockchain space shares that to some extent, to varying degrees. But from the technology standpoint, I have been monitoring blockchain for quite a few years. It took me a lot of time to understand the Bitcoin's white paper and how proof of work, etc. works. And then when I understood that, I read the Ethereum paper, and then I stayed up all night because suddenly there were so many applications which could possibly happen. So after that, when I was working on property development crowdfunding, this was always at the back of my mind that, okay, if we want to scale this, then blockchain is the natural way or the natural next step, because we can sort of leverage it to build something which operates in a decentralized manner. I think I have the vision which I have for Estate Baron or Konkrete is we want to be a level playing field where everybody has the same level of chance, and the processes have to be transparent and fairly implemented, and blockchain is the only mechanism in which that can be implemented at scale. So that's where I see all of this fitting in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's very aligned with our own ethics in that manner, that we really appreciate the nature of blockchain in adjusting the playing field and really giving everyone an equal go in that regard. So great to hear that you're involving that in your project.
The vision which we have for Estate Baron as well as Konkrete is when we set up the fractional fund, which we can talk about later, is we want it, anybody who wants to crowdfund their home, everybody should have the same chance, obviously based upon the merits of the property, but it shouldn't be the case that we are able to sort of push our own properties first. Okay? So everybody should have the same chance, completely transparent, and we also want to structure it in a way that if somebody comes up with a better implementation for the fractional fund, their fractional fund can sort of supersede us. So we want it to be completely transparent, decentralized, and fair to everybody.
So basically holding very true to that narrative that blockchain's already begun in evening that playing field and giving everyone back some of that power. So I guess let's look a bit now at Konkrete, your project, the collaboration between the two of you. What's the problem there that you're aiming to solve in the housing market?
So I think all of us who are of a certain age, and even people who are beyond a certain age, can appreciate that housing in Australia is very expensive. It's very hard to save the 20% or whatever amount of money you need for the deposits. Yes, interest rates are low, but what has happened because of that is in the last few years property prices have gone really high, and the amount of money you need to save for deposits has been proportionately increasing. So what we want to do is we want to allow people to fund their deposits or release equity, which means that we will be able to match people who want to buy a home but don't have enough money with those people who want to own property but don't want to buy the entire property. And on the flip side, what we also want to do is we want to enable a system where people who are looking to release equity, they can do that without having to sell the property or having to take on additional debt. So that's the vision which we have for the Konkrete fractional fund.
Barrier to entry currently very high, especially for us here in Australia. Many people struggling to get that money together for the deposit, as well as actually liquidity issues within the housing sector, in that you're creating the means to release equity from an existing property.
Correct.
Yeah,
And I think
fantastic.
it's a generational thing as well, especially young people, where we have good jobs, but we also appreciate, going out with friends, traveling and that kind of stuff. So it's really impacting on our ability to save. But, even when banks can happily lend you the amount, the deposit is what's really holding people up. On average, in Sydney now, it's over 8 years to save for a deposit on an average wage. In Melbourne, it's 6.7, So this is a way for people to get into the property ladder now, and whilst they're saving, they're already in it, so they're
That's
not
it.
missing out and waiting until it gets even more expensive until they can actually
'Cause I
buy.
see that vicious cycle of, you've got this 7 years in front of you where you want to save for your deposit, and then by the end of that, you've actually got another, however much
Prices
to
have again
save,
gone up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of really allowing people to get involved, and they're going to start to see some of those benefits while they're actually still raising that money to actually get started. So brilliant. So how is blockchain technology actually leveraging you in a position to be able to achieve some of these solutions?
Yeah, so there are a few things which we need to understand. The first thing is when we set up this fund, we wanted this fund to be completely have a complete level playing field, where anybody who wants to crowdfund their deposit or release equity has the same level of chance, subject to the property's merits, and also and the enforcement, the governance of the fund should be completely decentralized. Now that's only possible using blockchain. The second thing which we see as use of blockchain technology is we are trying to crowdfund deposits over here. Now the first word in the first part of the word crowdfunding is the crowd. Okay, so unless you have a big enough crowd, the chances of actually raising money don't really exist. Okay, so what reaching out on the blockchain allows us to do is to reach a much wider audience. This allows us to have people from, let's say, Venezuela or South Africa invest in a fraction of a property or a small amount of property in Australia. So that way they can access asset which is quite secure, and the people who want to raise money for their property can reach to a global audience. So the blockchain basically allows us to achieve a global distribution. And the third and final thing which I would say is the nature of blockchain is such that you don't need a central party to manage the exchange of units on the chain. So just like on Bitcoin, you don't need a single party to swap your Bitcoin with each other. If we register the units of the fund on the blockchain, then we don't need to list on the ASX or somewhere else to deliver liquidity to the investors. So which means that anybody who is an investor in the fund is implicitly liquid because the backend unit registry is using blockchain, which means that anybody can exchange their units as long as their KYC complete and subject to AML CTF regulations. They can swap their units in the fund with somebody else for the whatever consideration they may have, and that gives the fund an inherent liquidity. So governance, distribution and liquidity are the three things for because of which we are choosing to deploy this on blockchain.
Yeah, and that's three areas super applicable to your project. That blockchain really is that perfect solution, and great to see a project that it fits into so nicely, and some smooth rollout hopefully, and we'll be able to see this up and working.